Hi, this is Ron Darling with SNY TV. You know me from covering the Mets, and I hope you get a chance to listen to Mets Musings with Gary Mack. I had a great time. I hope you do too.
Hi, I'm Ron Swoboda of the 69 New York Mets, and you're listening to Mets Musings with Gary Mack.
Mets Musings is an unofficial, independent podcast covering New York's National League Baseball team. It is not affiliated in any way with Major League Baseball or the New York Mets.
This is Len and Jeff from Baseball and Barbecue.
And the one place to go for New York Mets news,
Past week game reviews,
upcoming series previews,
interviews,
analysis,
opinion, and what's going down on the farm. It's Mets Musings with Gary Mack. So keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets.
Mets Musings with
Gary Mack.
Now it's time for some New York Mets baseball talk. Here's Gary Mack bringing you the latest news and analysis from Mets Nation and the world of baseball on another edition of Mets Musings.
And hello and welcome to another edition of Mets Musings. Hope you all had a great week out there. Weather is getting colder outside, and but the good news is we have a manager. Carlos Beltran has been named the manager of the New York Mets. He's the 22nd manager in Mets history. And no, he's not on the show today. We'll get something other than that, something special, but I wanted to discuss that a little bit. I'm okay with this deal. I know he's a first-time manager, and I know what everybody's thinking. We just went through that. But I think it's going to be a little bit different with Carlos Beltran. He's got a little bit more of a cachet. He's got a reputation behind him that Mickey Callaway didn't. He's a potential Hall of Famer, and I think that's going to give him a little bit of a more say in what's going on, where I think Callaway was more of a follower. I think Beltran's going to be more of a part of everything. At least I hope so. And he's got the respect of the players, respect of the front office, and I think it's going to work out okay. I think we have to give him a chance and see what happens. Again, as with Callaway, the hiring of the other coaching staff is going to be key in this situation. Who they go with, there are rumors that perhaps he would like to have Terry Collins as his bench coach. And I think that may be a good move if they go in that direction, but we will have to see if that's the case at this time. So we have lots. I've got a great interview, if you will, coming up. I went on a tour of a baseball exhibit at the Morris Jumel Mansion in Manhattan. It is called Home Plate, a celebration of the Polo Grounds, the birthplace of New York's love affair for its favorite teams, and it's an exhibition curated by Neil Scher, and we're going to give you a little taste of the tour as Neil gave it to us. I was joined by the boys from Baseball and Barbecue, Jeff and Len. Three of us went in, and they're going to have part of an interview that they did is going to be playing on their show, and I'm going to play on my show the tour section, and I am going to also putting together a short little video of the tour on YouTube, so be sure to look at that at youtube.com. I think it's /MetsMusings, but you can just search for Mets Musings on YouTube. And this exhibit is going to be at this mansion, the Morris Jumel Mansion, until January 5th, so you still have time to get there, and Neil Scher is usually there on the weekends. So you can actually talk to the curator, the guy that created this, and has got a lot of great knowledge about the exhibit and about New York sports and about the Polo Grounds. So you may want to go check that out. But let's get back to the Mets news. Peter Alonso got, I think he got gypped out of the Silver Slugger Award, lost to Freddie Freeman, but he is odds-on favorite to get the Baseball Writers Rookie of the Year Award next week. That will be named, as well as a Cy Young Award winner. He has gotten Baseball America's Rookie of the Year so far, and I think there was another one. He was named Rookie of the Year in the National League, so he is getting his due, but didn't get the Silver Slugger Award, which they named last night, and I think he got gypped. Freddie Freeman got it, had better offensive numbers overall, except of course in the home runs and the RBI department. So, it's a half 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and you just have to live with certain stuff. Edgardo Alfonso answered the question, or gave his opinion on why he was not retained as manager of the Brooklyn Cyclones. As we said, Brody wants to get his own guys in, and he claims, Brody did, that it was a player development move. And how you can say that when Alfonso wins the championship, that's pretty good development of players, I think. But being said, it really is a question of Van Wagenen wanting to get his own people in there. Even Alfonso said that. And he's not sure if he's going to stay in the organization. He'd like to remain in uniform. Maybe the Mets should consider him for the big job then on the Major League club. Maybe give him a job as the quality control coach or something or other. He may do a very fine job at that. So we'll have to see how that plays out as we keep rolling along in the offseason. Should be an interesting winter meetings coming up in about a month or so. See which direction the Mets, are going to go. All kinds of rumors on the internet, and everything. They're going to go after Rendon, to Garrett Cole, to Strasburg, to Zach Wheeler, to Daniel Hudson. It's all over the place right now, and nobody really knows what's in their thoughts or in their minds, and we just gotta wait. Saw a thing today about would they trade Jeff McNeil. The Rays were looking at Jeff McNeil last year. Could they be interested in him in again? And maybe we could get Kiermaier and somebody else for him. Mookie Betts, can we put together a package of Syndergaard to get Mookie Betts here for a year? Everybody wants to fill its center field slot, and those guys would probably be worth it. I personally, I'd like to see him get Rendon. I'd like to see McNeil at third, I guess. And actually, I'd like to see McNeil at second and Cano at third. And, that is if you don't get Rendon, I should say. I'm all confused now. Rendon. Get Rendon, let him play third. Move McNeil to second. Cano can sit on the bench and ride as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if they're going to do that. If they don't get Rendon, Van Wagenen says he's got J.D. Davis. He's got McNeil to play third. Cano at second. Cano's not going anywhere. I know it, folks. Really, what should happen if they don't sign a Rendon is move McNeil into second, and Cano should be moved to third. That's the way it should be. Finally got it straight. Get all confused there. See what happens when you get old, you get confused. And I think that basically covers a lot of the stuff. There's not a lot of stuff going on right now. A lot of rumors and innuendos and stuff flying around. Not innuendos, but a lot of stuff flying around, and nothing solid yet. There is going to be the QBC again. That will be, I believe it's January 18th. No word on the site of it yet, but it will be that date, January the 18th. All right, let's take a break, and we'll be back with my tour of the exhibit, Home Plate, a celebration of the Polo Grounds at the Morris Jumel Mansion. And we'll be back after this.
Looking for great Cardinals talk? Then check out Conversations with C70. My name's Daniel Shoptaw, and I talk with some of the great bloggers on the internet today about their teams. But it always comes back to the Cardinals. Find the latest episode on my website, www.cardinal70.com, or at baseballpodcast.net.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for interesting baseball talk, opinions, and history.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for barbecue recipes, tips, and interviews from the world of barbecue. If you like baseball and if you like barbecue, then tune in to Baseball and BBQ. Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and BaseballTalkRadio.com, along with Mets Musings and other great baseball podcasts.
With all the Mets news, it is the news from around the world and around the corner. Here's Gary Mack.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Morris Jumel Museum. My name is Neil Shearer. I'm actually an attorney and an art dealer and a sports enthusiast, and the museum contacted me if I can do a project based on an exhibition based on the Polo Grounds, being that the Polo Grounds are basically across the street from the museum. So in this museum, I always say that it has a pretty good batting order already with Washington and Hamilton and Jefferson. We think we add to it by bringing in Ruth, Mays, and Mantle. So anyway, let's go on. Being that this is considered Coogan's Bluff, we might as well start with the miracle of Coogan's Bluff, one of the most famous moments, if not the most famous moment. So in 1951, the Giants and Dodgers finished tied at the end of the year, and they have to play a playoff. And some people don't remember that it was a 2 out of 3, not a single playoff game. And in the deciding game, Bobby Thompson hits a home run off of Ralph Branca from my hometown of Mount Vernon, so it hurts me a little bit more than most people. And Russ Hodgson makes the famous call, the Giants win the pennant, Giants win the pennant. What we have here in this piece display is the record of him making that call inside the sleeve. In original wire photos, we showed Leo DeRocher, Can't Love Him Enough, that is Bobby Thompson, and Bobby Thompson being serenaded by the fans who won't let him leave throughout the night. The rare ticket stub from the game and the program signed by the two players. What I found interesting was so many people anticipated the Dodgers winning and not the Giants. We have a program, Dodgers playing the Yankees, and of course it's the Giants playing the Yankees. If you know history, it's sort of our Dewey defeats Truman piece, as we call it. And my father's, this is from Brooklyn, in his honor I put the way it should have been and the way it was. So what you'll see throughout the show are displays that we created, and what we're trying to do is tell great stories that took place at the Polo Grounds or revolve around the Polo Grounds in some fashion. And although a single autograph is great, a single ticket is great, we think by putting a culmination of pieces together, especially rare and authenticated artifacts, we tell a story. And Americans, I think, love story, and sports is certainly part of American culture. So now as we move on, given just 7 months to put the show together, I couldn't do all my displays, which usually take 6 months to a year to do. So here's some smalls, as I call them. And of course you have to have Jackie Robinson in any baseball show. And he breaks the color barrier in 1947, as we know, and 3 days later at the Polo Grounds, he hits his first home run. There's Monty Irvin and Hank Thompson, we show. They break the color barrier for the New York Giants in 1949. And Hank Thompson's actually interesting. A year or so earlier, he broke the color barrier for the St. Louis Browns. He's the only person I know of that broke the color barrier for 2 different teams.
Wow.
Now, when we think of great moments in the Polo Grounds, and one person I wish I had done more to, you have to think of Willie Mays. And of course, in 1954, he makes a spectacular catch off of Vic Wirtz, who probably would have been a home run in every other park. In fact, I think some announcer or writer mentioned that Mays would have made that catch in every park, including Yosemite.
Right.
Now, the ticket that you see there is from 1951, and it's the year when the Yankees beat the Giants. But I believe it's one of the few times where the playoff champion Giants, because of the Bobby Thompson home run, overshadows the actual World Series winning Yankees.
Right.
Now, I'd like to move over. We're going to move to football for a minute here. People don't realize that there are a number of teams that played at the Polo Grounds. One of them is the New York Football Giants that played there from 1925 to 1955. And if you're looking at my display, you'll note that I have a sheet signed by almost all the players. If I'm simply in the memorabilia world, I would have flipped that and made my money, which probably is what I should have done. Instead, I spent 2 years putting this sucker together. And what you see here are the programs from every game, or just about every game played in 1938. Wow. What I like to mention is that they played teams called the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Brooklyn Dodgers that we usually associate with baseball teams. Right. And the reason is football was a fledgling league. It was barely making it. And to get notoriety, they would try to piggyback off of the more successful baseball teams. Here we see a picture of a very handsome young Wellington Mara. Wow. And his father, Tim Mara, bought the New York Football Giants in 1925. Does anybody want to guess how much they paid for the Giants?
$125, something like that.
Well, that's the first one. Anybody else want to give a guess?
$25,000.
$25,000. What do you say?
$2,500.
$2,500.
$5,000.
$5,000. The actual amount that the New York Football Giants, the Maras, paid was the unheard of sum of $500. It's worth $300 billion now, so it's a pretty good investment.
Yeah, not bad.
I will say one thing though. Even though the $500 sounds like a no-brainer, in that year, 1925, they almost didn't make it. They almost went bankrupt. It wasn't until the last game of the season when the Chicago Bears and the Galloping Ghost comes into town, and they bring in 70,000 people, and the Giants and the Maras said, maybe we have something here. Now, the other thing I like to point out, I'm a University of Wisconsin grad. Go Badgers, although they've looked terrible the last, thank goodness they have a week off this week. They looked terrible the last 2 weeks. But I miss college football in New York. And when we think of college football, even today we think of guys 280 pounds, 300 pounds, 325, certainly in the pros. Back then we show the roster about if you were 210 or 215 back in 1938, you were a big guy. I love the fact here there was a guy named Tarzan White, a great name from Alabama, was a guard at 5'9". Maybe Altuve could have played football back then. I don't know. In any event, again, we like to do that. Now, another thing I like to point is college. Generally, people think of the most important football game ever played was the 1958 Giant Colt game. I agree with that. The second one I would also argue was probably the Colts against the Jets in Super Bowl III. But I think the third most important college game ever played, or pro game ever played actually, was in 1930 at the Polo Grounds. It was between the New York Giants and, believe it or not, the Notre Dame All-Star team led by Knute Rockne. Wow. And why I thought it was so important was college football, believe it or not, was considered maybe a superior sport for a long time than the pro game. Right. So what happens is the Giants defeat them very easily. And Knute Rockne says after that game, I'm just happy my boys weren't hurt. It sprung after that game. Pro football was always considered the better sport, But the sad part about that story was 2 months later, Knute Rockne was killed in a plane accident, and that was the last game he was the coach.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, when we think of college football, people don't realize Columbia had good football teams. Sid Luckman, Fordham, the Seventh Amendment Granite with Vince Lombardi, and even NYU had a good football team. So we show that here with these programs. Imagine Alabama coming into the Polo Grounds. Imagine Georgia coming into the Polo Grounds. Harvard-Yale games were played there at Thanksgiving early on when they were important. Army-Navy games were played there. Notre Dame would come into town. It was a big deal. As a matter of fact, they outdrew the New York Football Giants in the 30s and 40s college football games. People can't believe that. So we want to show a little bit about that. Now let's get back to baseball. I know that's what you guys like, so let's get back to baseball. So on October 8, 1956, we just passed the anniversary, Don Larson pitches the perfect game. And in our display, we first of all show a ticket. It's not an ordinary ticket, it's a full ticket. Those are pretty rare to come about. Then I like to show programs, but I want it to be contemporaneous to the game, not somebody put it in like 3 months later or 6 years later. So we're pretty lucky about that. But look who signed my program.
Ed Sullivan?
Ed Sullivan.
Wow.
So the question becomes, is it that Ed Sullivan? Kind of a common name. Right. And if it was, did he sign it at the game or later? Well, sometimes you get lucky with photographic evidence. I know your listeners can't see this, but we have a photograph showing Mr. Sullivan signing the program in one of my programs there. He was actually a sports writer during that period of time. So that's kind of interesting from a research point of view. Now, of course, we show Mickey Mantle makes a very important catch in that game to preserve the perfect game, as well as hitting a home run. And we show it original Daily News. This wire photo I found the most interesting facet of the whole game, of the whole display. There's Don Larson signing a baseball, and who was he signing a baseball to?
Branch Rickey.
Close. You're in the right. You're thinking correctly, but wrong. Any other guesses who that gentleman is? I will give you the hint that should make it easy. The most hated man in Brooklyn.
Oh, O'Malley.
Okay,
Yeah.
so get this. His team just lost a perfect game. He's smiling to get this autographed baseball. I cannot see George Steinbrenner asking Pedro Martinez for his autograph if he has done that. So I thought it was interesting. Now, but you know what? If you think about it, maybe Mr. O'Malley is showing financial savvy. 2 years later, he will be taking out the beloved Dodgers to Los Angeles, and maybe he understood that was a good financial move, even though it destroyed the hearts of Brooklynites.
Yeah.
And if we could find that ball, I'm sure that ball's a $75,000 or $100,000 ball. So I thought that was interesting. Now the other thing is, you may be wondering, where's the tie-in with the Polo Grounds? Well, here it is. The scoreboard shows, of course, the perfect game, but it shows the Giants are playing the Steelers at 2 p.m., the football Giants. Why that's so relevant? That's the first game. The New York Giants will not be playing at the Polo Grounds. Now they'll be playing at Yankee Stadium. They'll be moving, as we'll find out many teams move out of the Polo Grounds. So when we think of great pitching, oh, by the way, here's another thing. Babe Pinelli, one of the well-known umpires, he retires after that game. When we think of umpires, generally we think of controversial calls or bad calls. But from an umpire's point of view, I would suggest that his greatest moments are being behind the plate for a perfect game or no-hitter. Those are his milestones. So if he was going to retire, I can't believe
Go
out on top, right? Now, if we're going to be thinking of pitching in perfect games, we got to think about the great Sandy Koufax. So here's our piece dealing with all 4 of his no-hitters. As you know, when he retired so prematurely because of injuries, he was a leader with 4 no-hitters. His first no-hitter, believe it or not, was against the lowly Mets in '62. And a gentleman named Mel Steiner was the umpire. We want to give the umpire some credit here in this piece. I don't know if many people do. And Felix Montilla made the final out. His second no-hitter was much more challenging against the great Juan Marichal of the Giants. And Frank Walsh was the umpire. And you can see this. We got his autograph on a baseball. Sometimes we did that. And Harvey Keene makes the final out. And then moving to the third no-hitter was in '64 against the Philadelphia Phillies. Ed Vargo's the umpire, and Bobby Wine makes the final out. And why Bobby Wine makes the final out, he foul tips the ball into the throat area of Ed Vargo. And Ed Vargo's in total pain, but he refuses to leave. And when you think, he didn't want to hurt the rhythm of Koufax. And when you think about it, that's very important. When you're doing that well, you don't want to hurt your rhythm. An umpire change could be 15, 20 minutes, who knows? Yeah. So Koufax, I thought, in these original Sporting News, I believe, prints, writes, thanks for a great game, Sandy Koufax, to the umpire. Maybe that's a little suspicious, I don't know, but I thought it was interesting. Well, if you think he liked Ed Vargo for that game, he must have loved him in '65. Ed Vargo's the umpire in the perfect game. Wow. Many people will think it's the greatest game ever pitched because of the fact that Bob Henley, the pitcher of the Cubs, an okay pitcher, had his great day, pitched a one-hitter. So you have one hitter in a perfect game. You can't do much better than that. And believe it or not, Harvey Keene makes the final out as he did in game 2. Wow. And there's a great Koufax. I'll make another little point about Koufax. He was probably the greatest Jewish baseball player. You can argue with Hank Greenberg and things like that, but certainly pitcher. Let's put it that way. And in 1965, in game 1, it was Yom Kippur, and Koufax, not super religious, but a person of tradition, thought he thought it would just be right not to play in that game, and he did not play. And who replaced him? John Drysdale. And what happens in that game? Drysdale gets bombed. Has a terrible. Of course, he's a great pitcher, but he gets bombed. That happens sometimes. And Walter Olson, as he comes to take the ball away from Drysdale, what does Drysdale say?
I'm converting or something?
No, he said, I bet you wish I was Jewish too. So in any event, I bring that up because it's interesting. As a Jewish kid, I found this interesting. 3 weeks ago, in the ALCS and the NLCS, 3 games were played with Jewish players. Right. They all played, and they all lost.
Right.
And so my friends would come up to me, Neil, they broke God's rule. They played on Yom Kippur. I said, no, much worse than that. They broke Koufax's rule.
Yeah.
So anyway, so as bad as the Mets were in '62, they went in '69 and '86. And here is our piece that we pay homage to the '86 team. And we have all the tickets for the 7 games against the Red Sox. Some lucky fan who must have sat in that seat at Shea Stadium in 1964, the backing of it. The famous play where Bill Buckner goes between his legs, and Mookie Wilson, of course, does that. And I'm always amazed nobody gets hurt in these scrams, these pile-ons after we win a championship. This poor guy, I don't know if that's Mazzilli or who that is, but there's one guy in the bottom who I can't believe he survived that. And again, we have various tickets from opening day to when they clinched the pennant and all that other stuff. Now, what's interesting, many people don't know that the Mets and the Jets both played in the Polo Grounds in the early 60s. The Mets played 62 and 63, and the New York Jets played from 60 to 64. And so we have a little area here that you can see if you come to the show. By the way, we hope everybody comes to the show. I'm here generally on weekends giving tours, and what we have here are programs from the Jets and the Mets during the time they played at the Polo Grounds before they went to Shea Stadium. Here we have a ticket. I think this is one of the most interesting single items that we have. So on December 7th, 1941, America's attacked at Pearl Harbor. And at the Polo Grounds, the New York Giant football team is playing the Brooklyn Dodger football team with 55,000 people in attendance. Unlike today, and this makes with technology's advancements, where cell phone texting, we would think everybody would know about that we were at war within minutes of the game, or certainly by the first quarter. Nobody knew that we were at war until they went home that day. There were some indications at halftime, apparently, on the loudspeaker, they would say, Regiment 37, please report to headquarters, something like that. But nobody was thinking about Pearl Harbor. How can they?
Yeah.
So, in any event, I find that very interesting part of the Polo Grounds history and American history.
Can I just go back here?
Sure. Any questions? Let me know.
That seat.
Yes.
Do you know what section it was from?
I would like to know. I don't believe it has that information. I'm thinking. Knowing,
it's from the mezzanine.
But it's from the that's what I was thinking. Knowing the seats that I would get would be very high up. Knowing my history.
I only asked because I had tickets for years in the mezzanine at Shea Stadium, and I had seats number 1, 2, 3, and 4.
That's fantastic. Maybe we had something. Maybe it's your seat. You might have been the guy sitting in that seat.
I might have had my.
Now let me ask you: Were you at any of the games?
There's some mustard dripping right there.
There you go. There you
go. Was your seat?
If there's beer there too, then that's mine.
Now, by the way, were any of you guys at any of those 7 games?
I was at game 1 and 7 of the World Series.
Wow! Congratulations.
I was at game 2 at the World Series.
Now that's fantastic. There's nothing like.
I was in college in Ohio.
As a matter of fact, as I've told people, I think it's the time to let you know, the reason why this whole idea basically came about was because of a game 7, but it was a bad game 7 for me. It was in 2004 when the Red Sox came out of nowhere to sweep the Yankees after they'd been out 3-0.
Yeah.
And my brother, who I had season tickets with, couldn't stand it, so he left about the 5th or 6th inning. Usually the Yankees can make a rally, but this seemed like there was no chance.
Yeah.
And by the end of the game, it was almost all Red Sox fans. And I, trying to be nice, I went up and I congratulated them. I got a few curse words levied at me, but most of the people were very thankful that I did that. And they told me, they said, I wish my father was around. I wish my grandfather, I wish my uncle. And what I did at that point was I took a ticket from that game and I sent it to my best friend's from University of Wisconsin father, who was a diehard Red Sox fan, a great art collector, by the way. I happen to be an art dealer too. And he said to me, when I framed it nicely, and I wrote, hope you enjoy it. Nobody deserves it more than you. Remember to enjoy it. It happens only once every 86 years. And he contacted me and he said, Neil, gosh, it's the greatest gift I ever gotten. Don't tell my wife, but it was up to me. I tossed the artwork aside, which we're talking major artwork, Hopper and Mondrian's, and put this in a place of honor it deserves. Yeah. And I knew he was joking, but not completely. Yeah. And that's when I said, if I can do something to show history in a way that I think everybody likes, sports fans, history nuts, art lovers, our version of triple play in a sense, I thought we have something. And I hope your listeners come here and see if they agree with me in what we've done here. Now let's get him back into the tour here. We have the great Lou Gehrig, who unfortunately disease took his life. It was named after him, basically. And what you see here are all the tickets from every World Series game Lou Gehrig hit a home run in. Wow. And underneath it is the autographs of the pitchers he hit the home runs off of. Jeez. And what I found, of course, the connection is his last home run was against Carl Hubbell here at the Polo Grounds. By the way, imagery is very important to me. So I wanted, of course, to take a likable, happy Lou Gehrig. I just wanted to let you know that's not a photograph, that's a painting of Lou Gehrig.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know we get a lot of wows from it.
Yeah.
Also, to tell you the truth, one of the big, besides finding these things, which take forever, they also, by the way, I work with a gentleman named Paul Malk, who's very helpful on these matters, on these pieces here. He's a teacher in Virginia, by the way. So anyway, what we do here is these autographs take forever to put together, and what we do is we also have to get them authenticated. We use James Spencer's used by Major League Baseball, and most of the time we're pretty lucky and we get things right. But the Lou Gehrig autograph was wrong, the first one we did, and that's like an $8,500 hit.
Yeah.
You know, and for us, the money was a big nuisance, but even the bigger problem was the amount of time we lost putting it together. So anyway, this, by the way, autograph is correct, and there's a picture of the great Lou Gehrig, and we think a very special player. The hardest autograph, if you want to know, besides Lou Gehrig, is getting a guy like Grover Cleveland Alexander.
Yeah.
Now we go to a different decade, my father's favorite hero, the great Mickey Mantle. And here we have, by the way, in 1968, my father took me to a game against the Orioles when Mantle hit a home run, so I was really fortunate, I think. So anyway, we have all tickets from he has 18, he has a record for most home runs in World Series plays, so this piece pays homage to that. We have the ticket from every single World Series game Mantle hit a home run in, and underneath it is the autograph of the pitchers he hit the home runs off of.
Wow.
And what I'd like to point out to you guys is, when you're playing against the World Series, you're not only going against the best teams, you're going against the best pitchers. So Sandy Koufax, who we spoke about, Bob Gibson, who who's there, Preacher Rowe, Sal Magley, Lou Burdett. So I think these are pretty special. And again, presentation's very important to us. Another thing I'd point out about Mantles, I've had many people come to me and said, you know, I hated the Yankees, but I love Mickey Mantle. And when you think about it, there are very few players. Usually you hate the team, you hate the whole team. I think Derek Jeter might be an exception. Maybe Michael Jordan might be an exception. But generally, he must have had so much charisma that when he came up, he was very special. So anyway, we're about halfway into the show. I hope you guys like it so far. You want to continue?
Absolutely.
Okay, we're
Hell
recording
yeah.
now. Okay.
Hell yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so we're going to go more into the Yankee here. First of all, as an artist, I wanted to give you an imagery of the Polo Grounds at Yankee Stadium, and here is the piece dealing by Ben Gantz showing Polo Grounds and Yankee Stadium. It wasn't that close, but it was definitely walking distance. It's always been a kind of a mystery to me how when John McGraw kicked out the Yankees, how he could possibly let them go basically across the street. You know, if you hate Ruth that much, you shouldn't want him across the street. You should want him. You wish he did a Walter O'Malley thing and took him to Los Angeles. Anyway, let's go over here.
I'm old enough to remember that if you sat at Yankee Stadium from a certain vantage point, you could see the Polo Ground.
You know what? I've been curious, and I don't know if anybody here knows. Did people ever go to what I would call a city doubleheader? Did they ever play games in the day at night, where people would go from one game to another?
I was young, so
I'm just curious. But anyway, I should look into that. Here's the piece of Roger Maris breaking Babe Ruth's record, and to me, I consider it still the record at 61. People come here and argue with me about the steroid value and how that affects it. For me, I believe Maris is still the guy, but that may just be me. So anyway, here's his 60th home run that we show in a wire photo being greeted by Elston Howard, first black Yankee. Can you imagine how he felt touching home plate knowing he tied Babe Ruth? There he is hitting the 61st, signed by Maris, the great Babe Ruth original autograph, the ticket from 1927 that Babe Ruth hit a 60th home run.
Wow.
The program for Maris' 60th home run scored by somebody at the game. The program for Maris' 61st home run scored by somebody at the game. The ticket from his 60th, ticket from his 61st. We tell the story of Roger Maris breaking Babe Ruth's record. Wow. And if that's not enough, guys, on the program we have Tracy Stowers' autograph, the pitcher, and Sal Durante who caught the ball. I think that's about as complete as you can get.
Wow.
And by the way, just to let you know, these pieces take from 6 months to years to complete. We really work hard on them. And if you see the name Neil Shearer, generally that means it's still available or it's my collection. But some of them I have sold, and my clients are all over the country, and they're nice enough to loan it for the show. But I will tell you this, they contact me often, when am I getting it back? When am I getting it back? When is the show over? So I tell people to come over to see the show before you may not see these again. Anyway, here we go to a really incredible piece. And this is the 27 Yankees. And what you see here are the autographs of Bob Musial, Earl Combs, Babe Ruth. We did it like an outfield.
Oh, yeah,
Then third base was Dugan, shortstop Koenig, second base Ozari, first base Garrick, the catchers, the pitchers. The 4 ticket steps that as they swept the Pirates. We're lucky it didn't go 5, 6, or 7. It might have taken another couple of years to put these things together. The program of showing the 2 managers, and this is interesting, the check, signed by Colonel Jacob Rupert, co-signed by Ed Barrow, to a gentleman, Johnny Nee, we'll get to that in a second, and a press pass to Louis Heilbronn, another way to get in the stadium. What I thought was interesting when this was put together, and I looked at it later on, is what you see are Garrick had some college experience, Combs had some college experience, Ben got at Niagara, but most of these players did not even finish high school or got maybe 10th or 11th grade, and yet look how beautiful writing was. And I hear cursive writing is coming out of style or not even taught anymore, and I think it's a big mistake because it tells our personality. I've tried to reach out to handwriting experts. Maybe you guys could agree with my observation or not. If you look at Babe Ruth's signature so close to Lou Gehrig's, you can feel the different personalities. Yeah. Ruth, bold, dynamic, charismatic.
Look at that.
Lou Gehrig, shy and elegant. Can't you see that?
Yeah.
And it was just lucky that the autographs are right close to each other so we can see that observation. Getting back to the Jacob Rupert check here, it's issued to a guy named Johnny Nee, spelled N-E-E. And why that's important was Johnny Nee was a chief scout for the Yankees. He would sign guys like Bill Dickey. In my fantasy world, I'm thinking that the $250 was used to sign Bill Dickey, but we don't know that. Being that it's the end of the month, it's probably his monthly or something to do with that. $250 is not bad back then. So I think this is really... Now, another thing, as we go through the show, the 2 things they didn't tell me about when I came here was, one, that there's no air conditioning, but it's okay, we're in the fall. But 2, the lighting is not very good. So at first, we got to keep this down a little bit. They didn't want me to use a flashlight of any sort. But when I told them I got Bobby Thompson's bat and I cut it down and put this in here, they let me bring it in here. So anyway, you'll see me with this bat whenever you come to the museum giving a tour. Now, speaking of going back to Roger Maris again, what we have here are the autographs of every pitcher Maris got a home run off of in 1961.
Wow.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, although there's some really cool signatures, you could start to see them getting sloppier than they are in the 1920s, which are more elegant, I think. Now we show a picture of his first home run off of Paul Foytak, his last off of a dejected Tracy Stallard. The kid who caught the ball, to me, looks a lot like Billy Martin.
Yeah, Billy Martin.
And he, of course, he made $5,000. From what I understand, he bought a house, and I think he went on a honeymoon or something like that. Now, here you could see the pressure and stress with these photographs that we show of Maris. You could see in this photo as he looks at the statue or plaque of Babe Ruth. He's almost haunted as he takes on the Ruth. And reports are he lost a lot of hair and that. For full disclosure, it's the only thing I have in common with Roger Maris. So anyway, here are the here's something I always recommend. We have a sheet here, an illustration cartoon kind of thing, showing all the magical, famous moments that happen at the Polo Grounds. Now, here's the great Joe DiMaggio. And we have all the tickets from his World Series home runs, and we also have the autographs of the pitchers he hit the home run. And of course, this last one, similar to Lou Gehrig's, was at the Polo Grounds off of Sal Magley. But what I found interesting was when we put this together was the fact that not one of Joe DiMaggio's World Series home runs was hit at Yankee Stadium. They're rolling around.
Wow.
Yeah. So what I reminds me of is that famous night that whether it occurred or not, it makes sense in some ways. When at Two Shores, Mr. Yawkey of the Red Sox and I think Dan Topping of the Yankees got drunk and traded Williams for DiMaggio.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's not that far-fetched. When you think about it, it could have worked. Could you imagine what DiMaggio would have done with the Green Monster and what Williams would have done with the short porch? It's pretty crazy. Now, the other thing is when we brought these things into the show, unfortunately this piece had been damaged. The glass had broken, and you could see I have to work on a little repair here. So I told people that night, I have good news if you're a DiMaggio fan and bad news. The good news is his 56-game hitting streak has not been broken. The bad news, how display has been. So anyway, but it's here now for everybody who wants to come. Now we have a little area here. By the way, how are you liking the show so far?
I'm loving it.
Okay, so we have a lot of visitors here, but we want more. So hopefully you guys will spread the word, and we'll have more people here to see this, I think, special show. Some people have called it New York City's Cooperstown. Whether it is or not, I think it's a great show for baseball fans, sports, and art lovers. Anyway, what I'd like to show here are some individual players who had some importance of the Polo Grounds. For example, Eddie Grant. Very little know about him. He went to Harvard, so it's called Harvard Eddie. He would say, "I have it," instead of "I got it," because that's proper English. But more of a poor Eddie Grant is the first ball player to die in World War I, and there was a memorial at the Polo Grounds where for many years, when it was knocked down, it was lost for a while, and that's our little respect to Eddie Grant. Now here's the great Christy Mathewson, a Bucknell graduate, a chess and checkers champion, who I, in my own belief, would have visited the Morris Jamel Museum. Being an intellectual that he would, I think he would like to know the history of Washington and Jefferson and Hamilton, who, by the way, at this museum, the play Hamilton, which is so popular, Lynn Miranda, who wrote it, was allowed to sit in the Aaron Burr seats. Aaron Burr lived here for a while, and he was able to write his play, 2 weeks of it anyway, at the Aaron Burr room here. Of course, they don't give me that respect, but anyway, it's still a great seat. But anyway, Chrissy Matheson, Big Six as he was called, unfortunately had also a bad experience. He went to, in World War I, basically more or less a friendly fire incident. Mustard gas went off near him, and it affected him, and he died at the age of 45. It's amazing. What he would have done with his life, I think, would have been really interesting. Another interesting fact, right next to him when the mustard gas went off was Ty Cobb. It didn't affect Cobb at all. It's just amazing. Here's a person I think really gets lost in history and shouldn't be, is Roger Connor. He was Babe Ruth before Babe Ruth. When he retired at the turn of the century, he had 138 home runs and was by far the leader. He and it lasted 23 years before Ruth didn't just beat it, destroyed it. And I think that's why Mr. Connor is not well known, but I think he should be. And there's a thought, because the Giants were called the Gothams before they were the Giants, and he was always called the Giant. He was 6'3". There's some thought that the word Giants came because of Mr. Connor. I don't know that for sure, but there's some thought about that. We bring Mel Ott, we bring Fred Bonehead Merkel, one of the most crazy plays of all time. The only thing I can think about it that's somewhat similar to during my livelihood is the George Brett incident, when George Brett went nuts. But I think that pales in comparison to what happened here. When the little bit about it is a 19-year-old kid. He's starting his first game. He gets a single to move Moose McCormick from first to third. Then a guy named Al Bridgman, I believe, gets a single to drive in Moose McCormick. The crowd goes crazy. Frank Chance is the manager of the Cubs. He decides that he says to the manager, Hank O'Day, that Mr. Merkel did not touch second base. Probably didn't, but it was kind of commonplace. However, interestingly enough, if I understand, Frank Chance had told Hank O'Day this 2 weeks earlier in another game against Pittsburgh. So, meanwhile, Frank Chance and John McGraw are just yelling at each other and arguing. Christy Matheson supposedly is trying to get Merkel to go to second. The ball comes into the field where supposedly Joe McGinnity, the pitcher, throws it into the stands. Whatever happened, we don't know, or at least I haven't gotten a real definite decision. However, after him going to the locker room and thinking about it, Hank O'Day says, "Ow." Well, this is 1908. They don't have lights. It's dark. They can't do the game.
No replay.
No replay. I wish if we could have a replay of anyone, that would be a great one to have. So anyway, they replay the game a couple weeks later, I believe, and Christy Matheson doesn't have his best game, and the Cubs win. And that would be their last World Series till the one in 2016. So I found that really interesting. The other interesting thing is, you guys are baseball nuts out there, Hank O'Day is quite interesting. About 6 years later, he becomes the manager of the Cubs. Hank O'Day is the only player in baseball history to be a player, manager, and umpire.
Wow.
I thought he went to the Hall of Fame as an umpire.
He may very well umpire the Burkle thing. They probably put him in the Hall of Fame just so he could explain what happened, because they couldn't. But anyway, let's go on.
Would that be considered a conflict of interest today, to go from umpire to?
I don't think so. If you went there and still were the manager, if you umpired and were the manager, then it would be conflict of interest. Now, some of the other great aspects of the Polo Grounds are the great fights that took place here. People as an art dealer, I don't know, or an art lover, there's a famous artist, George Bellows, who does a famous painting of Dempsey going through the ropes. I think it's like in the top 2 or 3 most important paintings in American history. It's based on the Louis Firpo Jack Dempsey fight that took place at the Polo Grounds in 1921. 78,000 people, something like that. And although Dempsey goes through the ropes, he later comes back and wins the fight. By the way, it's on YouTube. You can actually watch it. It's the most brutal fight I've ever seen. Unlike today, where you have to go away for the 10 count, you just hovered over the guy and he gets up, you start whacking him again. It's unbelievable. But there were 9 knockdowns in 2 rounds. Then, of course, we have the Joe Louis-Billy Conn fight. Billy Conn's upsetting Joe Louis. He's ahead on all scorecards. He's frustrating Louis. He's beating him. If he just stays away the last 3 rounds, he wins the fight. But he tries to knock out Louis. Louis knocks him out, and then Billy Conn. You can see him being knocked out there. The last fight I'm going to talk about is the Floyd Patterson-Ingemar Johansson fight in 1960, where Floyd Patterson defeats Johansson. The year earlier at Yankee Stadium, Johansson had defeated him. This is the first time a heavyweight regains his heavyweight championship. So that's interesting. And the final piece of this tour, I hope so far so good.
Awesome. Yeah.
So I'm a freshman at the University of Wisconsin, 1978. My 2 roommates are Red Sox fans, believe it or not, so you know how we get along. Anyway, the Yankees and Red Sox finished tied at the end of the year, and they have to play a 1-game playoff as opposed to a 2 out of 3, which was with the Bobby Thompson. Incidentally, if I go back for 1 second, we think of Fred Bonehead Merkel as Bonehead, and I think history has been unfair to him personally. However, when I learned that Charlie Dressen won the coin flip and deferred the last 2 games to the Polo Grounds when he could have had home field advantage, I think I think he could have been a bonehead. However, after this World Series, maybe the home field advantage is not of importance anyway. Yeah. So you got to. But you saw how the Astros and the Yankees played so hard to the last day, just about the one day. And as I said, this was sort of, I believe this year was an anomaly. I mean, it's only only the first time, not only in baseball history, but in hockey and basketball, that all games have been won by the visiting team. That's why it will always be called, as far as I'm concerned, and it's not that creative, the home field disadvantage series. You know. So anyway, getting back to Bucky Dent, he hits that dramatic home run. It's different also because he does it like in the 5th or 6th inning as opposed to Bobby Thompson ending the game. But it was in many ways interesting because nobody ever thought he would hit a home run. From my own remembrance of that was watching Yastrzemski sort of collapse in left field, and you couldn't believe that Dent's ball went over the fence. So what we have here, forevermore, he writes about that whole incident, and forevermore he's called Bucky effing Dent in Boston. So he signs that way. Mike Torres, by the way, had won the World Series with the Yankees a year prior. So anyway, here are all the Red Sox who played in that game on 78 cards. We don't always use cards, but we thought so that all these cards. Don Zimmer, who most of us think is the bench coach for Joe Torre, was the manager, and there's a ticket from the game. Greg Nettles jumping up for joy of Yastrzemski's final out. I've always wondered if you talk to, I always thought a cool book would be if you talk to great major leaguers and you said, if you could have one at bat again, what would it be? I am almost sure in Yastrzemski's case it would have been this one. He would like to have that one again. Yeah. But it would be interesting to talk to great players and see what they thought about if they get one bat again.
I'm sure Carlos Beltran could get that question.
Yeah. Well, he might get that question next day or 2. Yeah. Anyway, here's Bucky Dent being greeted by his teammates Roy White and Chris Chambliss. And there again are all the Yankees. What's interesting, Bob Lemon started the year as the manager of the White Sox. Billy Martin got fired for the 10,000th time again, and he takes over. So we kept his actual card as a White Sox, even though he's the manager of the Yankees, but when they win the World Series. And of course, the late Thurman Munson dies tragically in a plane accident. So you can see we think we put a pretty good display here dealing with that piece. And anyway, if you have any questions or thoughts, or hopefully you enjoyed it.
This is great.
This is great, yeah.
And that was the tour of the baseball celebration of the Polo Grounds home plate baseball exhibit at the Morris Jamel Mansion with Neil Shear. It was great. We really had a great time. Go check it out. You'll enjoy it immensely. All right, I'll be back right after this.
Hey, baseball fans and book fans as well. This is Frank Nappi, author of the Legend of Mickey Tussler series, inviting all of you to learn more about my protagonist, Mickey Tussler, an incredible pitching prodigy who has autism. Follow Mickey's journey as he captures the hearts of fans everywhere with his blazing fastball and indomitable spirit. Please visit Amazon or www.franknappy.com for more information.
Hi, this is the world-famous Mr. Brewtown of BrewtownSports.podomatic.com. You know, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. Brewtown Sports. You can also listen to the show at Stitcher.com, TuneIn.com, and iTunes.com. And we've got the new one. It's called BrewtownRadio.weebly.com. But the one that I'm most proud of being on is BaseballPodcast.net. It is the home of great baseball talk shows. Check it out, my show and all kinds of other programs all about Major League Baseball. So check it out. That's baseballpodcast.net, the home for great baseball talk shows.
516-619-6341. That is the comment voicemail hotline if you'd like to be a part of the show, and drop us a line, leave us a comment or a voicemail, question, anything at all. Call that number, 516-619-6341, or go to MetsMusings.com and click on that widget in the middle of the screen, and that's a speak pipe, and you can leave a voicemail right through your computer through your computer's microphone. Or if you prefer to do things the old-fashioned way, send us an email at metsmusings@gmail.com. The Facebook page is facebook.com/groups/MetsMusings, and the Twitter handle is at MetsMusings1. And if you'd like to help out the show, check out our Patreon page. Check out the campaign at patreon.com/MetsMusings. And I hope that you enjoyed that little tour at the Morris Jamel Mansion. You know, it's an interesting place to go to, even if there isn't a baseball exhibit. It's one of the oldest mansion, or the oldest mansion in Manhattan, and it's very haunted. It's been mentioned on numerous of these ghost shows on television. The Hostler File, Ghost Adventures were there. They run paranormal tours, I believe it is, every once in a while. So it's really an interesting place, and it's just terrific to see the lifestyles back. So back in time. So you can go check it out, even if there's not a baseball exhibit. But there's a baseball exhibit running till January 5th, and I urge you all to go check it. Morris Jamel Mansion. You can find out more information at morrisjamel.org. Find out all the information there, the times, and all of that kind of thing. And that's going to wrap it up for this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank my guest, Nick Shear, and I want to thank the guys from Baseball and Barbecue, Jeff and Len, for including me on this little road trip that we did together. And I want to thank you all for listening, and don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, wherever you listen to or watch the podcast. Hit the subscribe button. That helps me grow the show and expand to new listeners. And more Met news next week. And until next time, remember to keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets. See you next time on another edition of